Welcome to this Australian Community Futures Planning videocast on the State of Australia in 2020. ACFP is an independent, not-for-profit centre of excellence in national community futures planning, providing an organising framework that can enable any and all Australians to increase the chances of improving our entire quality of life, our society, environment, economy, and our governance. At ACFP, we're working to bring Australians together to plan their own future as a nation. ACFP has been established to help Australians build a better Australia together. I'm Bronwyn Kelly, the founder of Australian Community Futures Planning, and this is the first of a series of videocasts in which I'll be taking viewers through a selection of the key findings of the research about the state of Australia in 2020 that has been set out in my book, By 2050. By 2050 is a book which, put simply, focuses on how Australians can work together efficiently within their democracy to leave a better world for our children and grandchildren. It has two main types of research. One strand of research is about the issues and challenges Australia is facing in 2020 and our current capacity and preparedness as a nation to deal with those challenges. The other strand of research is about how we can establish a new and efficient organising framework within our democracy to help us deal with these challenges. Firstly, by working together to imagine and describe the future we want. Secondly, by finding the best paths toward that future and setting them out in a clear plan. And thirdly, by setting up a reporting system that will enable us to influence governments more and check whether we are moving towards or away from our preferred future. This videocast is an introduction to the first strand of research, the research which collates the issues for Australia in 2020. It summarises 20 of the key issues that need to be solved by 2050 or sooner if we're to leave a better rather than a worse world for future generations. Subsequent episodes in this series set out more detail and supporting data about the current state of Australia in relation to each of these critical issues. For supporting information, viewers can also visit the ACFP website at www.austcfp.com.au or read By 2050, which is available in Kindle and paperback at links provided on the ACFP website. By 2050 examines Australia's current capacity, strengths and weaknesses as a modern society, economy, environmental custodian and democracy, and it looks at our preparedness for the coming challenges. It assembles research across a wide variety of quality of life issues, referencing over 800 statistical data points and observations of researchers, journalists, historians, economists and policy commentators. Because it puts all this in one place, it functions as a consolidated issues paper for Australia, marking a point in time, the beginning of the 2020s. The findings are that we have strengths and have been fortunate as a nation up until recently, but we are now facing significant challenges. Australia is a nation not in good shape in terms of its current health and well-being and its preparedness for future challenges. The things that have made us strong and resilient as a nation, a culture and a cohesive society in the past, up until about 2001, are now being eroded. At the same time, Australian governments and political leaders are currently incapacitated to the point where they are unable to offer a compelling vision for our future, let alone a path towards it. That path can only be found by Australians working together to build a plan for our particular preferred future. That plan has been made even more important by the onset of COVID-19. The fact that we haven't had a plan in place that ensures we are better prepared for crises like the coronavirus pandemic has exposed Australia to much more in illness, deaths, and economic loss than was ever necessary in such a wealthy country. Australian Community Futures Planning is helping Australians work together to build a plan that will improve our preparedness for and resilience in future crises like pandemics, climate change, and global economic downturns. But more than that, we are working with Australians to build a roadmap to the future we truly prefer, to the best one we can imagine together for our children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews. The plan is called Australia Together, and its main purpose is to increase our chances of a safe, secure, prosperous future for all. Australia Together is the nation's first National Community Futures Plan. It is currently in draft, and Australians will be invited to become involved in the drafting process during 2020 and 2021. But the foundations for Australia Together are already assembled in By 2050. By 2050 identifies the starting points for Australia Together. Starting points that are based on the facts of our current strength, health and well-being as a nation. This videocast will provide a snapshot view of some of the key findings from By 2050. The selected findings pinpoint some of our biggest weaknesses. As such, they form the basis for some of the most ambitious targets being drafted into Australia Together. So what are some of our current strengths? Australia as a country and as a modern nation is favoured with some amazing natural advantages. We live in a democracy. We are among the wealthiest of developed nations, both in total GDP and in terms of wealth per head of population. We have massive natural resources and positive prospects for national income, as long as we use our natural resources wisely. We have extraordinary human capital because we have access to free school education and a universal healthcare system. We share no borders with other countries. We have some sense of a power of self-determination in that we govern ourselves and are not ruled by an external power. And finally, we are not at war on our soil. But By 2050 examines whether we are at risk of losing these advantages and finds that there are signs that the health and well-being we have hitherto enjoyed as a nation are declining. We're going backwards in terms of the quality of life we've been used to, and we have significant weaknesses in our polity and culture that will act to reduce our strength as a nation unless we recognise those weaknesses and fix them. All of these weaknesses pertained before the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. Post-pandemic, it can be expected the weaknesses will deepen, and this doesn't apply just to the economic weaknesses. Social, environmental, and governance weaknesses will aggravate the economic recession we have entered. This is why Australia Together, as our nation's first National Community Futures Plan, will set up a clear and transparent framework in which Australians can address social, environmental, economic and governance issues in an integrated way. Australia Together assumes that if we are to return to prosperity, we will reach that point far more efficiently if we address these issues in an integrated plan, rather than in a piecemeal fashion. So where are those weaknesses? Where are we going backwards? What are the most striking issues that will affect Australia's capacity to maintain our current advantages in the coming decades to 2050? At a glance, here are the 20 most significant areas for concern. This list is not exhaustive, and nor is it in any particular order, although the first issue is probably crucial, since it is hampering our ability to meet all the other challenges. That issue is growing inequality. Thereafter, the issues are, number 2, growing poverty, particularly child poverty, along with growing homelessness and incidents of hunger. Number 3, a loss for the majority of Australians of fair shares of the national wealth they generate,
compared to the shares they used to retain. Number 4, growth in racial and religious prejudice and conflict and attendant exclusion of minorities. And number 5, continuing failures in Indigenous recognition, reconciliation and equity. Number 6, an inadequate and out-of-date constitution which acknowledges and provides for the people only insofar as they may act to elect representatives, and not insofar as they might play a more influential role in a participatory democracy. Number 7, a distrust of leadership, politics and government, and a withdrawal by Australians from democratic participation. 8, a move towards authoritarianism, autocracy and loss of human rights, including rights to free speech, assembly, protest, privacy, personal information protection, open justice and freedom of the press. Number 9, a loss of openness, transparency and ethics in governance, particularly at the federal level, and a declining capacity to report and investigate both government and corporate corruption. 10, fractious rather than cooperative and sensible international relations. Number 11, a loss of ownership and returns to Australians from public assets and services. 12, serious environmental decline aggravated by a winding back of environmental protections and regulations. And 13, a massive failure on environmental policy, especially on climate change. 14, an economy that is going backwards in every measure in terms of growth and the structure and fair regulation of industries and services that produce that growth. 15, inertia in our polity, some major industries, corporations and banks, and to some extent among Australians themselves, in terms of a transition to a sustainable, decarbonised economy. 16, a partially dysfunctional and disproportionately influential corporate sector, particularly in mining and the conservative media. 17, serious increases in the rate of physical health conditions such as diabetes and obesity, increases in mental health, particularly depression and anxiety, and no discernible decline in the reported rates of domestic violence. 18, declining educational attainment, particularly at primary and secondary school levels, and a dismantling and defunding of tertiary education capacity and access, all of which is having significant adverse effects on our capacity to increase productivity. All this adds up to number 19, a demonstrable decline in our quality of life and loss of social cohesion over the last decade, and 20, declining well-being and happiness overall. As I have already said, this list isn't exhaustive, although it may be confronting for some. Having said that, there is a way to organise ourselves to deal with these issues efficiently and somewhat more efficiently than they might otherwise be dealt with if we rely simply on organising ourselves via activism, protest and positive involvement with our local communities. These forms of local organisation and activism are vital, but they are likely to be overwhelmed by things going on globally and in places of concentrated power at home. To rebalance that power arrangement a little more in favour of Australians at large, we need a new way of organising ourselves. One where we can learn how to plan together. This is not hard. Any and all Australians can become involved in it, but it does require us to understand our issues and challenges more fully. Once we understand a little more about these issues and how they are actually affecting us, we are likely to be able to coordinate the best ideas for fixing them and for making Australia anew. We have this in our power, in our democracy, if we work together. by 2050 shows how. It sets out the techniques we can use in our democracy to build a better Australia together. The Australia we really want but have yet to specify. ACFP provides the forum that will enable Australians to do this. In subsequent episodes of this series, I'll provide some of the supporting detail on the challenging issues I've listed here to give viewers an insight into where we are starting from in 2020 as we plan our way towards a better future by 2050. We have a good idea of where we are starting from, and with the aid of an efficient democracy and some goodwill, we have it in our power to make the world anew. Thanks for watching this episode. For further episodes in this series on the state of Australia in 2020, visit ACFP at www.austcfp.com.au, or stay tuned for episode 2, which covers the first 5 of the 20 issues affecting Australia's chances of building a brighter future. Those issues are growing inequality, growing poverty and homelessness and hunger, loss of the fair go for all, growth in racial and religious conflict, and Indigenous recognition, reconciliation and equity. If you like this episode, please click like on the YouTube page and share the episode with your friends and subscribe to this channel.